Chapter 10. How Memory, Associations, and Beliefs Manage Environmental Information. From the moment we are born, our existence acts as a force upon the physical environment. We occupy a space that no one else can, and in return, the physical environment acts as a force on our physical senses, creating a causal relationship between us and the environment. Mark uses the term physical environment in the broadest possible sense. At the most basic level, we create experiences for ourselves simply by existing. Existence means our senses are alive and we are interacting with the environment, acting as a force. As we move through it, changing its composition and stability, our movements and actions create an endless chain of reactions that shape the landscape. Even when we're not actively changing the environment, we're occupying space and are therefore subject to the atmosphere's forces. At the same time, our breathing changes the structure of the environments.
Memories are stored as energy. The experiences that result from this interaction with the environment are converted into electrical energy pulses, which carry an electrical charge, either positive or negative, depending on how the environment impacted our senses. For example, a crying baby acts as a force on the environment by creating a sound that acts as a force on everyone's ears. The environment's reaction to this force creates an experience for the baby and determines the electrical charge, or quality of energy, recorded in the baby's memory. Quality of energy refers to the relative degree of positively or negatively charged energy where experiences are recorded. For instance, if the environment responds to the baby with comforting affection, love, and a sense that its needs will be met, the experience will be recorded in the baby's memory with some positively charged emotional energy. The degree of positivity depends on the intensity of the experience, i.e., the degree of the environment's impact on the baby's senses. The result of comfortable, happy, joyful, and loving experiences is the storage of positively charged energy. However, if the environment responds harshly in a way that violently impacts the baby's senses by screaming or hitting to cause physical pain, the experience is recorded in the baby's memory with a corresponding increase in negatively charged emotional energy. There are two fundamental components that create the quality of energy where our memories are stored. The first is the polarity of the charge, which can be positive, neutral, or negative. The second component is the intensity of the charge, which ranges from extremely positive, which would be an experience of great excitement, to extremely negative, which would be an experience of abject terror. Understanding the quality of energy is a crucial concept because it influences the kinds of assumptions we form about the nature of the environment, which in turn influences how we process information and interact with the environment. The nature of positively charged energy. Positive energy is expansive. It creates a sense of confidence and encourages mental growth and learning. This results in an openness to exploring and discovering the unknown. Douglas defines the unknown as anything that exists as a possibility in the physical environment, but does not yet exist in any form in someone's mental environment. Positive energy preserves our innate, childlike sense of curiosity and wonder toward the environment, which we are all born with. In following our own neutral sense of curiosity, we interact with the environment to create experiences and learn something previously unknown to ourselves. This builds a feeling of excitement for life. At the same time, our ability to function more effectively within the environment increases as we continue to learn more about how things exist. There is a direct relationship between how much we allow ourselves to learn about the nature of the environment and the amount of negatively charged energy in our mental environment. Douglas explains this by emphasizing negativity because learning happens naturally unless something in our internal environment prevents it. In other words, the absence of fear, negatively charged energy, is a critical factor in determining whether we will allow ourselves to learn and mentally grow. For example, toss a child into the air playfully, and they will demand you do it again and again. This is their way of interacting with the environment to maintain the feeling of a positively charged experience. Positive energy is expansive, compelling us to interact with the environment to create more experiences for ourselves. The more experiences we have, the more we learn about the nature of the environment. The more we learn about the environment, the better we can get our needs met, and positively charged memories give us a sense of confidence that allows us to try new things, which results in mental growth.
The nature of negatively charged energy. Now, take that same child and toss them in the air for the first time, as in the previous example, but instead of catching them, you accidentally drop them. Not only will they not ask you to do it again, but they will likely tremble in fear at the sight of you. The difference in their behavior is a direct result of the difference between the two experiences. In the first example, the experience was joyful, resulting in the storage of positively charged energy. In the second, the experience was painful, resulting in the storage of negatively charged energy. Fear and its limiting effects. Unlike the confidence and well-being that come from experience, fear acts as a limiting or inhibitory force on both our behavior and our perception of environmental information. The author, Mark, is certain that everyone reading this book has, at some point, experienced the effect of fear on someone's behavior. It can either force us to escape a clearly dangerous situation or restrict us to the point of immobility. It can motivate us to interact with our environment in a way that is limited by our memory structure, even if the environment offers something new on the path of a new experience. Or it can be the reason we completely avoid an experience. Experience is gained from interacting with the environment, and learning is possible from experience. If we experience the present of our environment based on our personal past, or completely avoid experience, then we are not learning what the environment is offering or making available for us to learn about its nature. The pure result of a painful experience is that it creates a negatively charged memory, which in turn creates and sustains a cycle of fear. The cycle of fear and dissatisfaction. Cycles of fear, in turn, create cycles of dissatisfaction and unfulfillment as we avoid experiences. We then deprive ourselves of the joy of learning. Just as positive cycles expand, negative cycles contract. Our painful memories prevent us from learning how to interact with the environment in effective and satisfying ways, which in turn leads to a happier and more satisfying life. Because we are not learning what we need to know to have a different experience, fear limits both the range of our behavior and our perception of environmental information. The ways in which it limits our behavior are obvious, although there are many ways that fear affects our perception that are not so obvious. In fact, some of the ways can be very subtle and difficult to identify until someone learns what to look for. As a trader, it is imperative that you are able to monitor market behavior from an objective perspective. To monitor objectively, you have to learn to recognize the subtle types of fear that will actually undermine your ability to be objective without you even knowing it. This is a topic Mark will discuss in more depth a little later. However, before doing that, you need to understand the nature of association and how it creates a feedback loop between perception, the inner mental environment, and the outer physical environment. Association. It seems that association is a natural quality of our thought process. That is, our minds are structured in a way that similar types of environmental information automatically get linked together. We do this primarily in two ways. First, people and objects have a natural tendency to be labeled based on some major characteristics, and then categorized into an associative group. After categorizing groups based on gender, hair color, skin color, profession, economic status, educational background, etc., we then associate whatever experience or knowledge we have about that group with all of the people and all of the things that have the same characteristics.
For example, if we have a painful experience with someone whose skin color is different from our own, we will automatically associate every person of that skin color with the qualities of that experience.
The second way we associate is by linking our sensory information with an event. We will automatically link what we are smelling, tasting, hearing, or seeing with the energy quality of the primary experience. For example, the other environmental information that a child's senses are unknowingly receiving from a beating will be linked to the pain felt from being beaten. What he smells, tastes, and sees will link the beating he's taking and that song or smell to the pain. Now, these two environmental distinctions, a specific song and a specific smell, will be linked to the negative energy in his mental environment. The child wasn't even paying attention to the song or the smell when he was being beaten because his attention was clearly focused somewhere else. Yet in the future, anytime he hears that song or smells that particular smell, they will automatically cause him to experience the negative energy associated with the beating even years later. If he hears that particular song or smells that particular smell, it will take him back to that moment just as if he were there. The present moment is changing his experience from one of joy to anger, sadness, or guilt. Of course, this principle also works for positive experiences. A classic example is that many couples have a song they associate with some profound sexual or loving experience. When they hear their song, it takes them mentally to the feelings of the experience with which the song is associated. In fact, the song eventually becomes the symbol of the quality of the entire relationship, where just hearing the song causes all of the memories and feelings associated with those memories to race through their consciousness. Association is an automatic function of the way information is organized in our mental system. Most of the relationships are unknown, meaning that we have positively or negatively charged energy associated with different elements of the environment, and we are not consciously aware of it. We can see, hear, taste, or smell something that, in turn, causes us to feel an emotion and not know why. This is because we don't consciously remember linking the outer sensory information to the primary event. The energy loop between the physical and mental environments. None of us has access to all the environmental information available at any given moment. Our senses were not created to let us see, hear, touch, taste, or smell everything at once. If we can't be aware of all of it, then we must have a mechanism by which we select what we will be aware of and pay attention to and think about. What we learn creates an energy loop between the inner and the outer environments. We can call this the perception energy loop. Perception is the identification of what we have already learned in the physical environment through our eyes, ears, nose, taste, and touch. The mental energy, in conjunction with our physical senses, does the work of sorting, categorizing, and managing the environmental information that we have learned. We identify what we have learned in the environment because that already exists within us. There must be a mental structure to receive the information, otherwise it is denied, declared meaningless, or not received at all, unless, of course, we are willing to create a framework for it, that is, to be open to learning. Distinctions create separation in environmental information where no separation existed before. A child will not perceive the difference between a pencil and a spoon until someone teaches him the difference. Otherwise, he will spontaneously put both in his mouth until the information stored in his mental environment acts as a force on his perception to distinguish between the two. Environmental objects give information about themselves, but the information that is perceived already exists within each individual until it is experienced for the first time. The spoon and the information about what it is creates an energy loop between the inner and the outer, where before the distinction is known, the spoon and the pencil are in the same category of things to put in the mouth. Everything that we don't know, but that exists as a possibility in the environment, is a distinction that we have not yet learned to make.
If we don't learn to make distinctions, then we will not be able to perceive the various types of information that the environment is giving about itself.
For example, if Mark opens up his computer, the experience he has will be very different from that of a skilled computer repair technician. All of the different parts giving information about themselves will make almost no sense to Mark because they have no meaning within. All the parts his eyes will be seeing will fall into that one big category of computer parts. This is because Mark has not learned to make the distinctions between the different parts, whereas the technician will see the parts very differently because he understands the functionality of the parts and the information the parts are giving about themselves, which Mark cannot because he doesn't have the mental framework to understand it. Learning how to read the market in order to recognize an opportunity is another example of how an energy loop between the inner and outer, which we call perception, is illustrated. Traders act as a force to move prices in the market. Since most traders do not plan their trades or take responsibility for their outcomes, they become afraid to act on any type of fear, which in turn makes their behavior very predictable to an objective observer. So under certain market conditions, a large group of traders will try to do the same thing because they are afraid of what will or won't happen, which causes an imbalance that results in prices moving in one direction. If you don't learn to make these distinctions, then you will naturally not perceive them when they are present. This is because perception requires an energy loop between the inner and outer environments. Mark is certain that everyone has experienced reading unfamiliar material a second, third, and fourth time, and understanding something new with each reading. What is happening here? With each reading, you are creating a mental framework that enables you to recognize what was available but was not accessible to you when it was first read. That is, the new information you gain with each reading was available at the very moment you first picked it up. However, you were not able to perceive what it was offering as insight or understanding until you created an energy loop that enabled you to understand it. Otherwise, the words are read, but the insight completely escapes one's notice, even though you are looking right at it. At any given moment, there's a huge difference between what each of us experiences and what is actually available in the environment and in terms of perspective. For example, take a salesperson who has learned to recognize the exact and most opportune moment to ask for an order and close a sale, or an auto mechanic who knows exactly what is wrong with a car from the sound it's making. To the inexperienced salesperson or auto mechanic, these abilities will seem like magic. This is because they will assume they are hearing or seeing the same things as their experienced counterparts. However, this is not the case. Even though they may be in the same sales interview or hearing the same car at the exact same moment, they are not hearing or seeing the same information. They're actually perceiving different environmental information because of the difference in the structure of their respective mental environments.
The information that signals the right moment to close the sale is no different to the inexperienced salesperson than all the rest. The same is true for the inexperienced auto mechanic. As a result, one will never gain a perception of the existence of this information until they learn to make the proper distinctions. If no one is there to teach them how to make these more defined distinctions that signal the most opportune moment to ask, then they would never know this information even existed. By learning to make more distinctions, we increase the depth of our understanding of the cause and effect relationships between all that exists. How does our perception shape our experience? We experience our environment through our senses. At the most fundamental level, the world is translated into electrical impulses of energy. The energy, which carries information, is simultaneously translated into emotions ranging from extreme happiness to anger, joy to frustration, love to hatred, and all feelings in between. Every first-time encounter with the environment creates a memory, a distinction, or a connection that didn't exist before. A first-time encounter is a completely unique experience, like learning the meaning of a word we've never heard before and having nothing in our mental environment related to it. These new memories, distinctions, and connections form a mental structure that constructs what we learn about the nature of the external environment. Once we've learned something, Mental energy acts as a force on our senses, allowing us to recognize what we've learned about it in the environment. We first learn something through a unique experience. Then we have the experience of recognizing what we've learned in the environment. Fear is a perfect example to illustrate this idea. We feel fear when we recognize, in the environment, something we've learned that can cause us pain. We'll feel this fear and consequently have an unwanted experience because the negatively charged energy in our memories, distinctions, and connections will act as a force on our eyes, ears, nose, and sense of touch, enabling us to recognize the same thing in the environment that we've already learned can cause pain. So when we experience something in the environment, mental energy is acting as a force on our senses in recognizing what we've already learned. The environment isn't acting as a force on our senses. In other words, the situation is the same or similar to what we already know, and therefore we can give some meaning to the information. The environment is not creating meaning like in a first encounter. The meaning already exists within us. And in essence, the way we understand it constructs the experience through our memories, distinctions, and connections. This is why a group of people can be in the same location and be exposed to the same environmental information, yet an individual can then describe the event differently. The event was different for each person because everyone experienced it differently. Their experience was a function of the structure of their mental environment. Each person will make a different association with the same information and then feel a different degree of positive or negative energy associated with those associations. Each person will make a different distinction with the same information. In essence, they will impose a different meaning on it. Each meaning will be created from a different degree of positive or negative energy, creating a different experience for each person.
Each person will also experience the duration of the event differently. This depends on whether they are experiencing the event primarily with positively charged energy or negatively charged energy. Without taking all these mental variables into consideration, it's no wonder that when people can't agree on what happened, they become so frustrated with each other. Everyone's perception of what happened was unique because how each of us experiences the external environment is a function of how we perceive it, and how we perceive it is a function of the things that already exist within us, unless we're in the process of learning something new. This means that what we experience about the external environment is shaped from the inside out, not the outside in, as most people believe. In other words, our first-time experience shapes the meaning and, at the same time, determines the quality of the energy associated with that meaning. Once the meaning exists within us, it shapes our external experience according to our preferences and ways of choosing information and how we feel about that information. This is a very important concept, so Mark is giving you another example to help you understand how our perception shapes the way we experience the environment. Imagine Mark is walking up to a statue of a person. He sees the statue head-on and feels indifference, meaning no particular feeling is generated from what he is looking at. Then he walks around the statue and changes his viewing angle in such a way that the statue takes on a new meaning, which causes his experience to change from being emotionally neutral to some powerful feelings of old memories, because he is now thinking of a person he is now reminded of. How did Mark experience the statue and that particular moment in the environment? The energy was within him before he even looked at it. The energy that changed his feelings didn't come from the statue and actually had no relation to the statue. Mark's unique mental structure gave him the experience of the statue that he got. Whenever Mark changes his perspective, it takes on a new meaning because the pre-existing energy within him acts on his perception. If he didn't have the positive experience with the person the statue reminds him of, he would have felt indifference whenever he looked at it. The relationship between perception and feeling is that the energy that determines how we feel in many situations, such as love and hate, joy and anger, confidence and fear, etc., does not come from the environment. These feelings are already a part of us, and we will automatically feel them when there is a matchup, a perception in the present moment with the things that already exist within us as a result of our previous experiences. For example, Imagine a father holding his 5-year-old son with one hand while hitting him with the other, screaming, "You're stupid." And assume that this is the first time the boy has ever heard this word. Now he may not know that the words will have a strong negative charge attached to them in his mental environment. Now, when he encounters these words again in the environment at some point in the future, he will be able to recognize them because they exist as a distinction in his mental environment. How will his perception of these words, as a result of the way he learned their meaning, influence his experience? Whenever he hears the word stupid, he will feel the negative energy associated with those words in his mental environment and, as a result, will experience the physical environment in a painful way.
Does the environment need to physically assault him as it did in the first experience for him to feel this pain? No, he just has to hear the words and he will feel the pain. The pain doesn't come directly from the environment after his first encounter with these words because it is already within him. Does it make any difference if, from the environment's point of view, the words were said with absolutely no intention of hurting him or any awareness that they could actually cause him to feel pain? No. He will not be able to understand the environment's intention at all, but he will think the environment wants to hurt him because that is exactly what he feels when he hears those words. How can he know that other alternative meanings exist for these words, or that they can be used in a good-natured, entertaining context? He doesn't, because he has never experienced those words in a fun context. He hasn't learned to make that distinction yet. From the point of view of his mental environment, there are no other alternative possibilities for the meaning of those words. In addition, he will never make an alternative distinction because every time he hears the word stupid, he will experience them in a painful way, which will create the experience of pain, which in turn will reinforce the negative energy is already associated with the meaning of those words. From the first experience to the future, and he'll be stuck in only one version of how he experiences those words. At any given moment, a whole series of experiences are available from the environment. What we experience as an individual is a function of our experience unless we are in a learning position. In other words, what we are experiencing at any given moment is being shaped by the things that already exist within us, such as memories, distinctions, associations, and beliefs. And what is already within us may not be anywhere near what the environment is. Experience is a proposition in that when we are in a learning position, we open ourselves up to learning new distinctions and alternative meanings to expand what we know about the nature of the environment. Our experience shapes our meaning, and then the meaning shapes future experiences. Let's listen to how Mark clarifies this concept for himself. In the spring of 1987, Mark was watching a local television show called Gotcha Chicago. It was about some local celebrities who played funny practical jokes on other established people in Chicago. In one part of the show, the TV station hired a man to stand on the sidewalk next to Michigan Avenue with a sign that read, "Free money only today." The man's pockets were full of cash, and he was instructed to give money to anyone who asked for it. Keeping in mind that Michigan Avenue is one of the busiest areas in the city, how many people do you think accepted their offer and asked for some money? Of all the people who walked by and read the sign, only one person stopped and said, "That's great. Can I just have a quarter for a bus ticket?" Nobody else even approached him. He finally got so frustrated that he started screaming, "Don't you guys need money? Please take my money. I can't give it away fast enough." Everyone just walked around him as if he didn't exist. He went up to a trader and asked, "Do you want some money?" And the man replied, "Not today." He asked, "How often does that happen?" as he tried to stuff handfuls of cash on them, also saying, "Won't you take it?" The trader simply replied, "No," and walked on. Now here is a situation where the environment was expressing itself in such a way that only one person had the mental structure to understand it. For the rest, they had no meaning inside them that could directly correlate with the situation of the actual environment. Other than the one person who wanted a quarter, nobody looked at the sign and said, "That's great, someone's giving away free money. I wonder how much they'll give me." The people's reaction should have been, "Great!" It's no surprise because we generally don't think that money is ever free, and we know what people believed about the situation just by their behavior. If they thought it was possible to get a free handout, we can assume they wouldn't have passed up the opportunity to get some.
Therefore, the meaning they imposed and what they experienced was consistent with their belief that free money is not possible or that people don't give away money on the street. In fact, most people probably thought he was crazy, which explains why people walked around him to avoid contact. Even though the environment was expressing itself exactly the way it was presenting itself, the sign that read free money was true, but the information about free money was not connected to anything in anyone's mental environment to be considered true. There was a direct one-to-one relationship between what a person believed, what they felt, and what they experienced. Everyone except for one person clearly did not believe in the possibility of free money. They likely thought he was a crazy person, and thus their experience was wrong relative to the situation. Now, the environment didn't choose what meaning any of these people gave to the information it was giving. And if the environment didn't choose, then each person created their experience from the conditions that were presented to them. Many alternative experiences existed, and each alternative experience will be consistent with the type of belief a person has about possibilities. Beliefs create definitions, make distinctions, and program our senses to select the information that we hear, see, and that matches our beliefs, thus shaping our perception of environmental information. Our experience of the environment will be consistent with the alternatives we've selected, and these alternatives will be consistent with the information that is perceivable. Although what is perceivable for each person may not have much to do with what is available or possible from the environment's point of view. In the free money example, each person will claim that what they experienced was the true reality of the situation. What reason would they have to believe anything else? People create their reality, their beliefs, and their subsequent experience in what can best be described as a circle or closed loop. What Mark means by a closed loop is that every component part in the process of how we experience the environment supports every other component, which makes everything seem self-evident or beyond question. These closed-loop systems created by beliefs are extremely difficult to open up. The beliefs control the information that comes into the mental system. The information that is actually perceived will be consistent with the beliefs. The course of action taken will be consistent with the perceived information, and the experience will in turn support and reinforce the validity of the beliefs. This is a closed system that doesn't allow for the possibility of other alternatives because the experience keeps confirming the belief, which causes the belief to seem even more self-evident and beyond question. Unless we are open or know how to be open to new information that can create new experiences, we will experience the nature of our beliefs at every moment, all the while thinking that what we experienced in every situation was the only possibility that was available. The people who are walking by the man giving away free money did not know that they were of this nature of the environment, so they will act as if it was their first time, without the knowledge that the possibility of a distinction exists, even though it's remote. Perception and experience should match, because we can't experience something that we don't already know about unless we are open to the possibility that what we believe may be very limited relative to what the environment is offering.
Do you remember the person who refused to even take the money? He was being offered an experience that would have increased the number of distinctions he could make about the nature of the environment, and as a result would have developed mentally. The free money being offered was clearly a distinction he didn't know about yet, and even though it seems like free money would be a forceful encouragement to question someone's belief that it doesn't exist, it was not enough for this person. His beliefs clearly did not allow him to even consider the possibility from a distance. Again, the closed loop was created, which caused him to believe that what he experienced in this situation was the actual nature of its existence, when it was all really a reflection of the nature of his beliefs and how he processes environmental information. Beliefs define the criteria by which we understand environmental information. By definition, all definitions create limits. To maintain a balance between the internal and external environment, beliefs will process information in different ways. Any perceived imbalance will create some degree of stress or confusion. Our new response to environmental conditions will be automatic to maintain balance because our perceptions make the responses self-evident, when in reality, under any given set of environmental conditions, alternative experiences also exist where our perceptions have stuck us. Beliefs do what they're supposed to by blocking the flow of information into the mental system. They limit our awareness of information so that we learn step by step. If we believe that things exist in only a certain way, then our beliefs will act as a natural system to prevent the acknowledgement of any contradictory information. Considering or accepting any new or contradictory information would open up alternatives that we wouldn't normally have to consider. Too many alternatives too soon can cause confusion and mental overload. If it weren't for the limiting nature of beliefs, what would happen to our brains would probably be like a television set that picks up all the information being broadcast from all the TV stations and presents that information to us. Beliefs allow us to connect with one channel of environmental information at a time, so that we can learn about the nature of the environment through that one channel. We can then expand our awareness to choose another channel because we learn how to handle the additional alternatives that come our way as we become aware of additional possibilities. How does fear work to create the experience we're trying to escape from? What we experience is a function of the distinctions we've learned to make. What we focus our attention on out of all the distinctions we've learned to understand is a function of the intensity of the energy in the perception loop. Our conscious attention is only so much to focus on whatever information is available at any given moment. Fear has a profound effect on the limit of information that we can focus on. It causes us to limit our perception to focusing on the object of our fear. How else can we survive from what we consider dangerous?